Hi, welcome to my podcast, Becoming a Cut Flower Grower. I'm your host, Lydia, and I'm here to share my year of growing and selling cut flowers. I'll be giving you the lowdown on everything I'm doing and sharing all the highs and lows, the good times and the inevitable disasters, all in real time. Join me on my cut flower journey, starting right now. Hello and welcome to the latest episode. It's Friday the 6th of February 2026. Thank you very much for joining me for this episode. Now, you're going to curse me because I'm going to be yapping on about the rain again because it's kind of unavoidable at the moment. We've had yet another terrible week. So I thought I'll do some Googling and get some statistics just to put it all in perspective, because often I moan a lot about the rain and it's actually not been that bad, but it feels like it's been raining since before Christmas. So I was convinced that there was something a little bit strange. So here's what I have discovered. Now, according to the University of Reading meteorologists, there we are, got there in the end, I'm not going to say that again, they have said that we've had in the UK the longest unbroken spell of rain since 1908, which is a very long time. Now, the University of Reading is actually about 25 to 30 minutes west of me. And they also said that January 2026 has been the fourth wettest month since records began in 1908, or since they started counting in 1908. Now, the Met Office says that we've had three named storms already this year. We've had Goretti, Ingrid and Chandra. Temperatures have been around 0.5 degrees Celsius below average. That's across the UK, actually, as an average. So some places have been slightly warmer and some slightly cooler. And we've had in the UK 117% of its long-term average rainfall in January, which I'm surprised the figure isn't highest, to be honest. But again, it's averages, isn't it? Now, Cornwall in the southwest has had the wettest January on record. And my region, which is like the southeast, has had 188% of its average rainfall, which sounds about right because it has been absolutely dreadful here. And it's all been down to the presence of the jet stream, which has just kind of been stuck in this particular position, which has just meant that, you know, the way the wind blows in, that's the way the rain is going to fall. And we've had persistent Atlantic storms for the whole of January and clearly into February. And what it's meant is that we haven't had any time between these storms for the ground to actually dry out. And what it's actually translated to for me is just a really, really grumpy Lydia. I mean, I was thinking it was down to all these other factors, and I think actually it's down to just this sheer persistent rain, which is translated into lost days of work, virtually no time on the field whatsoever. And my other half, actually, yesterday, we were having a conversation about this, about what I was going to do. And he's actually gone up there today, bless him, and reinforced one of the paths that I walk across. Now, it's not in the field where the flowers are, it's where the hens are, but you walk across that area to get into the flowers, and the path is just absolutely treacherous. So my plot is on a slope, which is great in a number of respects in that I don't have any waterlogging. Everything is incredibly free drainage, and all the water just goes straight down the slope and kind of sometimes collects on the road at the bottom, but it doesn't affect me. But what it does mean is that it just gets incredibly dangerous to walk around. Now, I'm staying off the plot at the moment because the last thing you want to be doing is walking on your soil. And all right, yes, it's fine to walk on the paths really, but not if they're waterlogged. And actually, it's just too slippy and dangerous. It's not really worth the risk of being up there. But the area where the hens are, obviously, I'm there quite a lot. And it does need to be safe because the last thing I want to do is fall over and break something. So we were coming up with some plans for what we could do, just a sort of quick and dirty job, really. And he's put some road pins in and then some boards of wood, some planks of wood, basically, resting against the road pins, and then backfilled that with chipped bark. And that will just do two things. It'll stop the bark migrating down the slope, and it will also stop the chickens scattering the bark down the slope, because I have made this mistake before where I've actually used the deep litter from their house, which is supposed to go as a mulch on the beds, I've had to use that to put over the paths just so that I can get from A to B without killing myself. And it's a terrible waste of the deep litter, because it's just, it's full of chicken poo, really nutritious, really wonderful. And I do not want to be just walking over it. That's terrible. But what happened when I put it down is that the chickens just literally ran out of their houses screaming with excitement and scratched it all over the place. So it was counterproductive on a number of levels. But by putting these road pins in and the planks up, we can make sure that the bark actually stays where it's supposed to go. And I have been able to collect a lot of rainwater, so that's also been great. And as I say, the plants are fine, but I'm very, very conscious that this is not the situation for lots of people. And there are only a few times, to be honest, when slopes are an advantage, because 99% of the time I would give my eye teeth for something flat, because I can't tell you how difficult it is to have a plot that's on a slope and you're on a budget. So it's not like I've been out there and made all these beautiful terraces and there's all these steps and levels and all the rest of it. And it's not like a 60-degree slope either. It's, it's a reasonably gentle slope in parts. The worst bit is where the chickens are. But this is about the only time of the year when I'm like, thank goodness I have a slope. Now, if we have a frost or any ice or anything, I'll literally be crying, because then it backfires and you just turn up and there's like a ski slope that you have to get up. And that is particularly unpleasant. But I have to say that I don't have any waterlogging. But I'm looking at people's Instagram and some of the pictures and the videos are horrendous. So if it's you and you are flooded, I feel for you, because I can imagine how horrendous it is to come out in the morning and see either your crops underwater or your greenhouses. You have my complete sympathy and understanding about how traumatic that would be. And of course, the downside of the waterlogging is that the ground is unworkable. It's completely saturated. You don't even need me to tell you that, like it's obvious. You can't get any machinery on the ground either, I imagine. So it's going to delay sowing, planting out, and anything that's stuck under the water, there's a high risk that it's obviously going to rot, which is really, really unfortunate, and also delays jobs like hedge cutting or putting drainage in, or any kind of structural work that you want to do. I used to work years ago in a big garden by the river, which used to flood. And my boss insisted on putting the kitchen garden, right in the centre of this flooded area. And I kept saying this is a really bad idea, because things are just going to sit underwater for about 2 months every single year. But we did lose quite a few things, but he made me plant asparagus there. And that was the only thing that actually did survive, which is astonishing. They spent at least 1 month of every year completely submerged in water. And then every year they made the most incredible asparagus, and it was fabulous. So it's not the end of the world when things sit underwater. They're not going to die in a couple of days. But it's obviously very, very far from ideal. And some of the problems that I've seen with fields or gardens or plots that have been particularly susceptible to flooding is if the soil is compacted. And this can be a real problem if you're using like a field that used to be grazed. So, I mean, I don't have, my field used to be grazing for livestock. I don't think it's had any machinery on it because it's too slopey and you just wouldn't. But I don't actually have enough soil to even have a compaction problem. Bizarrely enough, I've only got about 50 to 60 centimetres of cultivatable soil. It gets slightly better the further down the slope you come, but it's still not brilliant. But I know that there are areas, like I used to work in another garden, and that had been a field for years, and it had been grazed, and it had loads of machinery over it all the time, and it was so compacted, it was unbelievable. There was literally, you could dig and dig and dig, and it was like just digging through concrete in a way. There was no earthworm activities, there was no air in the soil whatsoever. And it was very, very difficult, and it needed an awful lot of care and attention, which the client at the time wasn't prepared to do the work. But, you have to understand the basics. And if you have compacted soils and they're not aerated well, then when you get a lot of water landing on it, the water's just going to pool and sit on the top. So we did look into doing temporary trenches for that job, but the client didn't want to have that. But I mean, things like land drains, and there's all sorts of drainage things that you can do. Alternatively, you can just go with raised beds, which is what the client went for in the end. But obviously they do need to be a decent height, and it doesn't get rid of the problem, because what you find, and what I was trying to explain, is that you've then got your growing space sat on top of a compacted waterlogged soil. So you're not going to get the normal soil activity that you would want. Otherwise, you're just growing in compost, which is not going to be sustainable long term. You're going to have to do lots of amendments, lots of feeding, lots of care. And the danger is that if anything with a decent root gets down, once it gets down through the compost and gets to the soil, it's really going to struggle, because the soil's just not, it's too hard, and it's just, there's no air in it. There's reduced microbial life. There's no earthworms. There's no activity going on beneath the surface. So if you do have a serious flooding problem, then it's something that definitely needs to be addressed in the correct way, and also at the correct time of year, which is not when everything is sitting under the floodwater. So I hope you are not too flooded wherever you are. I hope you're not flooded at all, to be honest. It seems to be one extreme or the other, really. I mean, last year we had this ridiculous drought and all these heat waves, and the soil was absolutely parched and nobody had enough water. It was awful. And here we are, 6 months later, with more water than we know what to do with. Now, in the second part of tonight's episode, I want to talk about one of my favourite plants. So this is the continuation of my plant profile series, which I do hope you're enjoying. And tonight's plant is Verbena bonariensis. Now, this came out at number 8 on my list of most profitable plants in 2025. And having done my course with Jenny Marks and understood a little bit more about how you work out cost of production, particularly with perennials, I realised that I have not done the calculations properly. So I'm not sure Verbena would still stay at number 8 on the list. But for argument's sake, it's up there at the moment. And it's a lovely, lovely plant. I really, really love it. It's gorgeous. I'm a big fan of sort of naturalistic, floaty, purpley things, and it just ticks all of those boxes for me. I also love all the salvias and Nepeta and things like that. So it's right up there for me. And it is a hardy perennial, also known as vervain. Super tall, does need staking, gets up to about 6 foot. Now mine got up to about 5 foot last year with these lovely light airy stems and rigid stems as well. They're not floppy. And then they've got these small, delicate little purple flowers at the top. Very, very pretty. And some of the key benefits of this plant is the airy, light stems and the fact that they are super long. I mean, you could cut them right down to the base if you wanted to have a multi-stemmed plant as well, if you want to do some really huge installation or something. They've got that lovely wildflower look that everybody really likes, and they've got an excellent vase length. For the growers, they've got a really long flowering season. So mine kicked off in July and they were still going in October, and they just keep going. And they're absolutely perfect for sort of this lovely wild natural look. Super easy to grow from seed, and they self-seed all over the place. So that is always a bonus when you get free plants. Verbena bonariensis looks particularly good with grasses, amaranthus, echinacea, roses, and anything in a sort of yellow, orangey, pink colour palette. It contrasts really nicely to that. Now, I'm not pretending to be a florist here. I'm not particularly good at doing the colour arrangements. I really have to learn how to do this year, and I'm trying my best. I often cut things that I think look fabulous. Managed to do a spiral hand tie, having practiced that all of last year, and then look at it and go, no, the colours are all wrong, it looks dreadful. I'm really not very good at putting the colours together, so I did have to Google what it looks nice with, and the answer was yellows, oranges and pinks. Now, the downside of this plant is that it does have to be staked, and I made this mistake last year of not getting mine staked in time, and it was then something I had to do retrospectively with some road pins and some strings, and it was all a little bit messy, but it did work. Now, the stems actually are a bit rough looking. I find they're a bit like statice, is that the flower is very pretty, but then the stem is just a bit yuck. And they actually feel rough as well, like they're textured. And they also, the plants take up a lot of space because they don't go straight up vertically. They tend to come out on the diagonal. So they can take up more space than you think they're going to. You've got to make sure you don't put anything too small behind them so that when the sun comes around, if they're, 5 foot tall, they're not shading anything out. Although, to be honest, they're quite light and airy stems anyway. But it's just something to think about. And they do self-seed everywhere. So I didn't find that to be a massive problem last year. In fact, I don't think I had a problem with that at all. So maybe I did something wrong there. But I haven't got rogue ones cropping up all over the place, but in some gardens that I have been to, I have seen them absolutely everywhere. So they also don't want to have too rich a soil, so not masses and masses of nitrogen, because that will just reduce the flowering potential on them. I didn't know this, but they're actually native to Brazil and Argentina. And the seeds were imported to the UK in the 18th century, so they've been over here for a while. Now, knowing where they come from, they're going to like the full sun and a well-drained soil. And they'll cope fine in a poor quality soil, but they'll do really well in a decent one. So my story with this plant was really odd. I had them all entirely by accident, so that I grew them. The plants that I have on the field now, I grew them in 2024 for my trial beds. So I did a whole year of trial beds before I actually kicked off the business properly. It was supposed to start properly in 2024, but I had a whole load of problems. And if you're a regular listener to the podcast, you'll know it was all hormone related, and I kind of lost the plot a bit there, so I never actually got started. But I did end up with what I've called the trial beds, where I had this practice and then was incapable of doing anything else. And I had a minuscule budget in 2024. It's not much better this year, but it was tiny back then. And I bought nearly all of my seeds, the vast majority, from the supermarket. And I've done an episode about this quite early on. I think it's called something like What Happens If You Buy All Your Seeds from the Supermarket. And I bought mine from Lidl, which is a budget supermarket in the UK. And the seeds were ridiculously cheap. And these ones were actually not Verbena bonariensis. They were called Cleome hasleriana. Now, I love Cleomes. They're so beautiful, absolutely stunning. And I saw them and I thought, oh, this is perfect. I'm going to grow myself some Cleomes, because I was actually too scared to grow Verbena bonariensis. I kept looking at the packets thinking, there's no way I can grow that. There's just no way. I won't even attempt it. Don't even ask me why. I haven't got a clue. But I was too scared. Anyway, I sowed all these Cleome seeds from Lidl's, and they germinated perfectly well, started growing, and I looked at them and I thought, that is not a Cleome. And it wasn't. I had a whole tray of Verbena bonariensis. Very, very random. And I sowed the first lot at the beginning of March, and then I did a second succession at the beginning of April, and then planted them all out. And in the end, I had about 2 square metres, roughly. I can't remember how many plants I had. Didn't stake them early enough, as I said, and then used string to support them. So a bit of a Heath Robinson job there. It did do the job, but it made cutting them quite a bit harder because they all just sort of got tangled in the string. And I also made the mistake of planting them right by a pathway. So I was constantly getting caught on them, which was really frustrating. Now, I sold the stems in July, August and September. I didn't sell as many as I would have liked. I don't quite know why in my head I thought I would sell millions, maybe because I like them so much, and why I didn't sell as many as I would have liked. I'm not entirely sure. I need to find a more tactful way of saying to florists that I sell to, why don't you want these, in a way where it doesn't sound challenging. I'm literally genuinely curious as to why they wouldn't want them. I'm going to try that this year. I mulched around them with bark, with chipped bark, just to keep the weeds away and keep the moisture in. And they did absolutely fine last year. I hardly watered them at all, and that's even though we had this terrible drought all year. And then in the autumn of 25, I transplanted them all to the new section where Nigel lifted the turf for me. So they've gone down at the end of bed number 4 so that they are out of the way, because they were quite close to the entrance to the field. And as I say, right on the edge of this path that I was going past all the time. And I just got really cross with them, which was not their fault. It's mine entirely. They were very, very easy to germinate. As I just said, I thought they were something else entirely, so I wasn't overthinking it. They do like a reasonably warm temperature when they are germinating. So, I don't know, anything between like 18 and 22, something like that. And remember, that's the soil temperature, not the air temperature. Germination, going to vary, obviously, 10, 14 days, something like that, depending on the soil temperature and the conditions they've got. And then transplant them, harden them off, and off they go. And as I say, mine were very drought tolerant once they were all settled last year. So in terms of what I would do differently this year, well, I think I've already said I've got a new policy this year, which is cutting twice a week, regardless of whether I have an outlet for anything, which is to encourage plenty of new growth. I made millions of mistakes in 2025, and one of them was not cutting often enough and just leaving the flowers and just sort of admiring them. And then by the time somebody said, oh, I need 50 stems of that, have you got them? I'd look out and everything was just over and on its way out. So definitely cutting twice a week this year. And I will be staking these guys in advance. In fact, quite a lot of the items in bed 4 are going to be staked. So what I've tried to do when I was working out where to put the perennials and things in the beds was what is going to need staking. And so things that needed staking are all going together in the same bed, so that I don't have anybody missed out, and I also don't have things that don't need staking getting caught up in netting or anything. You know, I've got pittosporums and stuff, and I don't want them growing through netting. That would be daft. So I have tried anyway to put them somewhere where they're going to be next to. In fact, I think they're next to all the raspberries, so I think they're going to be staked and netted with the raspberries. I've also learnt for this year that the right time to harvest them is when the outer layers of the petals are open. I think I made a lot of assumptions, I think, last year about how easy it was just going to be to grow these things, because I've had them in gardens and, you know, they're a piece of cake. But it's quite different when you actually have to harvest them for somebody who's paying good money for them. So I want to get that right this year. And also I'm going to be keeping a close eye on the spacing, because, as I say, they're a plant that I don't think you can actually plant that close together, because even though at the base of them they're really quite small, you basically sort of have these sticks that come, not sticks, but the stems that come out of the very base of the plant right at ground level. But because the stems grow not vertically up, they come out at all these sort of diagonals, they can end up taking up quite a lot of space. And they also don't seem to have like a firm grasp on the soil. The roots seem quite tenuous and like they're not fully in, so you don't want to have them blowing around or any wind rock or anything like that, because the roots are just not going to be able to get access to the soil when they need. So I do think if you haven't grown these guys before, definitely give it a go. And when you have them en masse as well, if you have lots of them, like, they look super impressive, because you just have this wall of floaty purple. They're absolutely gorgeous. And I haven't added Cleome to my list for 2026. And as I've now banned myself a couple of times from buying any more seeds, I cannot even add any more to that list. Like I absolutely have to stop. Excuse me. So I will just be enjoying my Verbena again. Now they're not going to live forever. They're perennials. And so you can assume that they're going to live for, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years, something like that. But always a good idea, I think, to grow some fresh stock every single year. Like, don't wait for the original plants to burn out or die off or be wiped out. It's a good idea to have a certain percentage, and I don't know what this would be, somewhere between 10 and 20% that you restock every single year, so that by the time these guys have retired, there will be more fresh stock coming up through the lines. So I hope you found that interesting, and yeah, do give them a go. They're absolutely lovely. Now, I hope you have a lovely weekend wherever you are and whatever you're doing, and that you will come back and join me for the next episode on Tuesday next week. So that's it from me. All the very best.